incredibly lucky. We've got Gui Valente here over to teach us a seminar at this incredible academy, Luciano's Academy. And even more lucky that he's on us now and have a chat. We're going to talk about what we've just gone through, the training, the philosophy of Jiu Jitsu, and hopefully we're going to learn some stuff.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure to be back here in London after a few years to teach once again. Of course, Danny and I, we've been friends now for quite some time. We met first, was it in Miami or here? I remember I called you one time. I needed backup here in London, right? and you were ready. Yeah. And really enjoyed my time here at Luciano School. The first time we met, but doing a great job. Very nice, organized, clean school. And thank you so much, of course, also having one of our students, Eric from Holland, the Dutch kickboxer, Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So yeah, anything you guys want to talk about?
So we've just done the 6 pillars of ground fighting. That was the basis of the seminar that you taught us today.
Yes.
Nobody listening will probably know about this, about the book that you taught us about.
Yeah, this is actually very interesting because it's the 6 rules of ground fighting, which is part of a book called Game of Jiu Jitsu. This book was written by Yukio Tani and Taro Miyake. It was first published here in London in 1906, and it's a book that has, I think, a huge relevance in the history of our lineage, of our Jiu-Jitsu in Brazil. Reading the book, we see the similarities, we see the connection between the book's material and what we do and how Jiu-Jitsu developed. So actually, I really recommend those that like Jiu-Jitsu to grab a hold of this book. They, of course, at the time already, even though it was 1906, most Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, at the time, Jiu-Jitsu and Judo were synonyms, right? They were used interchangeably. But even though most of them had a Kodokan influence, these 2 Japanese teachers were really more independent, and they were also involved in challenge matches, and they were pushing a lot of ground fighting as well. So that's how we find it to be very interesting and connected to the development of Jiu-Jitsu, especially among the first Gracie brothers. Actually, Carlos and Eddie's dad, he was a businessman, and apparently one of his businesses was a circus. So in that circus, it was at the time, it was also common that in circus attractions, they had what now we call MMA fights. And usually the smaller Japanese fighting bigger and stronger individuals, and they were doing that throughout Europe. Of course, here in England, this happened a lot, and also eventually in America and throughout the Americas. So that's how Jiu-Jitsu first spread. The first revolution of Jiu-Jitsu in the early 1900s really occurred in a way similar to what happened then, almost 80 something years later in the UFC. So what else? What we should talk about? We were talking a little bit, Luciano and I, about the philosophy, right? And how Jiu-Jitsu, of course, is often said to be a philosophy, but few people really talk about it. Sure. So that's something that my older brother, Pedro, he really studied, of course, motivated by my father, who was a doctor, but practiced Jiu-Jitsu his entire life, became a grandmaster under Ed Gracie, and trying to break down the philosophy of Jiu-Jitsu according to, of course, the essence of Jiu-Jitsu, because we can't just make up the philosophy of Jiu-Jitsu, right? Jiu-Jitsu is an ancient martial art. There are roots, Japanese roots, even Chinese roots in its philosophy. So understanding that, and also based on what we learned the interpretation of that philosophy by Eddie Grace. So we separated it in physical aspect, the mental aspect, and the emotional or spiritual aspect. And that's why we organized a code to better explain it, called the 753 code. The 7 virtues of the warrior, the 5 elements of a healthy lifestyle, and 3 mindsets. So we even have a booklet. Do you have this booklet?
Yeah, constantly seminar.
It's not available online yet, but maybe one day we can.
It's a very nice book.
Yeah. We like our friends and students to come to Miami to visit.
Yeah, I said recently we'll go over.
But yeah, I should try to get you guys one.
There's not a lot of, I know from coming from a sport background, there's not a lot talked about too much in our history.
The next you're looking for, you go after, the knowledge, you won't come to you, no one talks about it.
I think that the way our jiu-jitsu developed was very loose. It was very free, and there are positives that come from that, but there are also negatives, and I think one of the main negatives is that we lost a little bit of this process of even education, right? I think that there is so much knowledge from our grandmasters that was really never transmitted to the younger generations. And today, the teachers that don't teach it, they're not doing it because they don't want to teach it. They're not doing it because of any other reason other than that's something that they did not learn, right? Exactly what Luciano said. So I think that's our contribution, is to try to motivate and also help those that want to teach it, because I think it adds a lot of purpose to the practice of jiu-jitsu, right? I think that the same way that we want to improve ourselves on the tatami, we want to improve our arm locks, we want to improve our triangles, our chokes, our sweeps, different techniques of jiu-jitsu, striking. We also can improve a lot as individuals, right? We can become better members of society. And it's not automatic. Sometimes we hear that, no, just by practicing jiu-jitsu, you become a better person. Not necessarily, because jiu-jitsu is a weapon. So as you provide that weapon to your students, I think it is very important to also make sure that you're teaching them the values, and having this connected with the fighting skills just makes the art complete, right? It really helps the children, it helps all of us deal with sometimes the biggest enemy. The biggest enemy is not outside. The biggest enemy is within, right? You might not have somebody trying to beat you up, hopefully not. Hopefully you don't even have to use these techniques in self-defense confrontations, but sometimes there's something that bothers you emotionally, and these skills can help tremendously when it comes to that. I don't think there's anything wrong, to be honest, with schools that don't teach. Right? Of course, we come from a background, your lineage in martial arts, my lineage, we like to see self-defense, we like to see that approach. But jiu-jitsu can be taught through different expressions. That's something that we like to say. And one of the expressions is sport, and that has developed tremendously. I just think that students have to be very straight, is that the term? Very direct with their students, correct. Instructors need to be. And students need to be very aware of what they're doing. So I have friends now that are coming to Miami and they want to develop self-defense programs in their school. so that they can offer that. But it's important to make sure that if a student is joining your school, they're not thinking that they're learning self-defense and all they're doing is something for sport. And then somebody might say, Guy, but they're getting tough anyways. Who's going to beat them up? A good competitor can fight. Of course. Just like a good rugby player. Just like a good basketball player who's very strong. Who's going to beat up those guys? They're athletes. But the focus of the class needs to be clear to the student. Are we doing self-defense or we're doing sport? I come from a school, even though it was a school under even Grandmaster Eddie, his sons, my instructor, Hoyder and Volker at the time, in the 1990s, the class was taught, and I'm sure Luciano grew up in this mentality too, the class is taught based on what's happening in the current competitions, tournaments. Guys, this is how you can score 2 points, this is how you can get an advantage, and that's completely fine. Sport Jiu-Jitsu is so big right now, right? So many advanced professional, advanced people doing it, so many young athletes in Brazil coming from nothing and becoming famous, opening up schools all over the world. It just needs to be clear. And that's something that we don't want, because I've been teaching now Jiu-Jitsu on a daily basis for about 25 years. My brother for 30 years. This year we celebrate 30 years since my brother first started teaching in Miami. And when we first started teaching, we were doing a lot of, taking students to competitions the first few years. Eventually, after a few years, we decided to focus exclusively in a self-defense approach. In the beginning, throughout many years, some people, even in the BJJ community, our friends, people that we knew, criticized what we were doing. This is not even Jiu-Jitsu, this is not real Jiu-Jitsu, maybe they're not sparring, maybe it's just the stand-up, maybe this, maybe that. Now, a lot of people want to do it. We see a lot of even old school Jiu-Jitsu representatives coming back to self-defense, doing self-defense. Yeah. I think it's great. No, even people that haven't been to our school, I think the people that came to our school, they want to learn. They're very honest about the fact that they want to adopt it in their schools, right? They want to. But some people, what can't happen is this. Oh, it's good for business. The Valente Brothers School makes money with that, so let's do that, and then it's what you're saying. Right? And that's why for us, we want to teach the philosophy. We want to teach. We were talking about it right earlier. Mm-hmm. You have to do what you believe. If you're going to teach sport jiu-jitsu and you believe, look at how many schools are teaching pure sport jiu-jitsu and have 300 students, 400 students, right? So if you want to have a self-defense program in your school, my advice to you is this: learn it, understand it, test it, and then teach it so that you can own those techniques. You need to be as passionate about a choke defense as you are to your favorite half guard sweep. If not, don't do it. And you could, if that's what you wanted to do it, right? You have the skills to do it, but you decided to focus on something that you were more interested in and felt was more
authentic. You have to be self-defense.
Yeah, but I think at the end of the day, I think the person will find their place too. I think they want to do sport jiu-jitsu, they go to a certain place, they want to do self-defense other place. The only thing that has to be clear, I think, online is which place the person is going for, right? Yes, it's very clear. Look, I'm a sport jiu-jitsu or I'm self-defense, but be clear instead of trying to say you do both and you don't do both. Exactly. So I think that's one or the other, and then give you the opportunity to pick up and choose.
Teach the stand-up self-defense as well.
Very good. We do a basic part of the syllabus, but it's a very basic one, no? So if the person want to go through that, then they have to go private, or it has to be a bit separate, because we try to do a bit of the self-defense and the sport jiu-jitsu. But you can't just, in one class, focus on the self-defense. There was no time for you to do sport jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
So you're going to
You
be
have a sample and the student know
exactly. Or you open a class just for self-defense, because you need a class for self-defense.
Exactly.
You cannot just do like 10 minutes of that and then that's it, it's done. You do need to repeat, go over all the details and everything.
And that's what I recommend. I think that eventually it's important to, especially if you feel that there's a necessity, because you could be in a school. I forgot their names, but there's two brothers in California. One time they talked about how jiu-jitsu for them was not self-defense. They did not view jiu-jitsu as self-defense. They never learned it as self-defense. And they're very successful at what they do. They're competitors, both have won, I think, world titles, and they run a very successful school. From what I hear, very hard-working guys, and they're clear about that. It's not self-defense. Right? Now, what's happening, and I think that was our advantage because of our connection with Eddie Gracie, who was our teacher, of course, our father. We decided to do that when we were in our 20s. Right? We made that decision in our 20s because what we're seeing is that a lot of people that are stopping to compete, they can't compete anymore. They don't want to compete anymore because they're retiring from competition. They're coming back to self-defense. It's never too late if that's what you want to do. But again, what is the motive? What is the motivation, right? Motivation comes from motive. What is the reason behind it? Is it because you really want it? Is it because you really like it? Or is it because now it's convenient? And hey, people do whatever they want, right? It's a free world and you should have the right to do whatever you want. But talking about, and that's the discussion here today, talking about why, how, believe in it first. Do it because it's something that you're connected with. And you know what? Learn it. Eddie Gracie was the toughest man I met in my life. He was, I even say sometimes, I think my friends will understand, it's maybe more common in Portuguese, suicida. He was suicidal in a good way. He was ready to die at any point to prove his technique, to test, not even to prove, to test. Because if he was convinced that what he was doing was wrong, he would actually change. That's something that few people know about Eddie Gracie. And he taught all of these techniques, the self-defense techniques that sometimes people see it being done in a very robotized almost manner. And they feel that these techniques don't work, that these techniques are boring. No, learn the techniques, find someone that can teach you, someone that does those techniques well, in a dynamic way too. Of course, you have to learn it just like you learn an arm lock slowly, but eventually the technique has to be done in motion, in movement, in a dynamic scenario with a little bit of resistance, sometimes with full resistance. You have to use maybe one direction, change directions, one technique, combination of techniques. So here's the question, and this is very interesting. We were having this conversation, starting to have this conversation. Why is it okay? How many guard passes you know? If you had to say a number, right? A huge number.
Yeah.
Now, why is it, Danny, that sometimes we can only do 2 or 3 choke defenses? Right? So that's when you're treating jiu-jitsu self-defense as a kata, like you said, which is important. You need to know the basics. You need to know, right, the introduction. Everything starts, there needs to be a process, an educational process, a pedagogy process. But eventually, if it's fighting, we know that you need variations, you need to change, you need different alternatives. And that's what we started to see disappear in jiu-jitsu. And it became just a tradition. No, self-defense is regarded as a tradition that needs to be respected, or it's just an exercise, or it's just a warm-up.
Formality.
Yeah, it's dead. The system is dead. It doesn't evolve, doesn't improve, while on the ground we see constant changes, constant discussions, constant modifications, constant adaptations to people's sizing. And that's what needs to be wrestling. That's what we've been doing, you know, because you've been training with us as well for the last many years now. And yeah, and you have to treat self-defense like that. You know, the same way that you pass the guard in many different ways, you can do a collar grab defense in many different ways. And Grace is the one that, you know, taught us what we know, and also, you know, motivated us to be complete. What he did, so we trained throwing techniques, we trained striking techniques, and we really dedicated ourselves to the art of teaching. We never used that to gain students. We were never the best fighters. We never promoted ourselves as champions. What we did was, okay, we want to teach the best way possible. And that's what we did, and that's what we try to do.
That's what I saw no striking before or throwing classes and doing sports. You never see that.
No, seminars were starting, even in our lineage. Seminars were starting from your knees. The whole seminar on what to do from your knees. Right? It was just a way for you to improve your class sparring techniques. Jiu-Jitsu is a lot more.
Because when we came to Miami, they said they would slam us on our heads if we stepped inside.
Yeah, we have a rule which is interesting. Of course, it's if you're practicing for sport, you can't do that. But we have a rule that if somebody picks you up and you don't open your guard, they're allowed to slam you. It never happens. We don't want people to slam each other because it's their own. But we say, look, don't hang. And back in the old school, remember there was a carpet right next to it, just like here. And Joel, who was very strong, he would walk you out and say, I'm going to slam you on concrete. And yes. By the way, when I was young, I don't know if you started training jiu-jitsu.
It used to be allowed.
It used to be allowed.
Yeah.
Used to be
Triangle defense. When we do a triangle, we roll it, bro.
And we saw him MMA.
So from my time, but
We saw him MMA many belts.
Yeah.
So
Carlos Newton, Matt Hughes, you know that?
yeah, that was like a double triangle. No, Rampage Jackson.
Against Ron.
Yeah,
Pride.
Good guys. No, thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you, Eric. Next time we'll do one in Dutch too. So.
Luciano, thank you for having us.
Of course, my pleasure, guys.
Brilliant.